All right, Bitcoin just hit $122,000, getting very close to hitting 123. So everybody's asking me what's going on, why are we pumping right now, and what is coming next? Well, in the US, they are having Crypto Week this week, and it looks like they're going to try and pass some major legislation, mainly the Genius Act, and what was the other one? The Clarity Act or something like that. But it's all around the aim of these two acts is to make the US the epicenter or the global leader of crypto in the world. And one of the things I do actually like that they put into this bill is they're making it impossible for the US to ever have a central bank digital currency. And they're definitely steering the ship more towards private companies running the running the stable coins instead. So like Tether, for example, and I have been saying for a while, this is why I think that Ethereum is going to get a whole heap of attention soon here. And that's why Tom Lee has just recently started, who runs Fundstrat, has recently started his Ethereum treasury company. So they're copying the Michael Saylor strategy, but they're going to do it with Ethereum. And his theory is that they're going to be seeing a lot of activity and institutional investment activity moving into Ethereum now because of the Stablecoin Act and everything like that that's being passed. They're going to it's going to divert so much energy and attention to Ethereum because all of these stable coins, majority of them run on Ethereum. That's where most of the activity is. So it's going to be putting a big light on Ethereum. I think that we could be about to see a massive transfer that is going to lead us, from Bitcoin, which has led the way the entire cycle, and alts have really been hurting. Anybody that's holding alts right now, probably in a lot of pain. They're finally just getting a little bit of a bounce now to catch up to Bitcoin. But Bitcoin's way above previous all-time highs, and there's not really any altcoins that are pushing above all-time highs at the moment. But I do think that we're about to see a shift soon out of Bitcoin into Ethereum when Ethereum finally plays catch up, and then into the altcoins. So let's jump in and have a look at the charts, and I'll show you what I'm thinking. All right, so I've got Sui up at the moment, and I think this is just a really good example of how good and how clean our system is. So at the start of the year, when we were running our Bali event, that was down here. We got a really nice entry off one of the previous year VWAP levels down here. And that was that entry model I taught in the Bali course, where you look for the pump entry after a reclaim. So I'll just quickly jump down onto the low time frames. I can show you guys what that looks like here. If we go on to, I've still got it drawn in. So anyway, this is where the entry trigger that we have when the order block, we have an order block that overlaps at what we call an imbalance, right? So this was the entry trigger that we were talking about, and it ended up playing out really, really nicely. And since then, we've had so many setups exactly the same as this. It's a very institutional style setup, right? And we just love to see those imbalances get filled after a big sweep of liquidity, and this is off our previous year VWAP as well, really important level, right? So love to see that happen. Anyway, this ended up being the bottom for quite a long time. So let's just jump off the replay tool, and we'll get back to our higher time frames again here. But anyway, so that was a really good entry trigger back there, and then we ended up reclaiming the developing yearly value area low there. So we'll jump on the 4-hour. And then we had a really nice push right into a perfect, super easy to trade falling wedge here, which was a really nice retest of that VWAP, which is our blue line through here, and then pushed all the way up to the developing yearly value area high, which then we had a double top out and rejected. Once we broke the low here, that's a really great signal to get out if you didn't sell the highs up here, right? So anyway, we go through a long downtrend, multi-month downtrend channel through here, which finally breaks out a couple of weeks ago, or really the start of this month, right? And then we have another sort of like consolidation here on the outside of that final pullback before the big push starts, and we start to move up to tag the targets from this down channel, right? But really, if you go back and have a look at it, the simplest way to be trading this using our strategy where it's super obvious. Okay, we reclaim value area low, pump all the way, and then we sell the value area high, reclaim and bounce off the value area low. So that's a buy trigger, and then selling once we finally come up here again. So 2, 3, 4 amazing trades right through here, right? This one as well. And then also we had a really nice little falling wedge off the developing yearly VWAP as well over the last couple of days. So I really love this system, and it makes everything so easy and gives me a great market map inside my head of where I'm thinking everything is going to go. Now I can use this on the altcoin USD charts, and then also on the altcoin BTC charts as well. It can be a really great little tool to just help give clarity on where the market is at, right? So at the moment on SUI, we really need to see this higher, well, it's not really high low, but this is more now a double bottom here. We need to see that hold. So this high low back here, it failed to hold. We obviously went a lot deeper, and then we've ended up getting pretty much a falling wedge versus Bitcoin. So once this falling wedge breaks out and we start to reclaim this developing yearly value area low and also previous year VWAP as well from back here, that is telling us that SUI now, the altcoin, is now moving against Bitcoin, and we should expect it to outperform. Now, it's probably going to continue to outperform all the way back up to here, and then we'll see what happens at this resistance points, or it may rotate all the way up to the value area high, and we'll see how it performs then. For SUI to get really bullish, we need to see it break out of the value area high like what it did versus Bitcoin back here, and then that will really take the show away from Bitcoin with this market. And we'll start to see that outperformance. And that's when it tells me that I want to be rotating more out of Bitcoin into the altcoin for it to run. So I always want to be looking at the altcoin Bitcoin chart. And I always want to be looking at the altcoin USD chart. But I think the period that we're getting into now in the market is we definitely want to be taking notice of what's going on with our favorite projects versus Bitcoin, because the time is coming now where it's looking like it's been, this, for example, looks like it's setting up a really nice accumulation. If we start to break out of, say, this 4,000 level, then that could really start to take off into the back end of the cycle when we get, alt season. That means I want to definitely be holding SUI once it breaks above these key levels, right? Okay, so to rehash and go back to my first thoughts. What's going on with Bitcoin? We've just pumped up and hit 123K pretty much. What did we hit here? 123,200 we hit in the last couple of hours. Unbelievable move. So my target for the rest of this move is actually to see it come up to the 2.272, which is 137K. That's the macro fib target that I've had in place for a long time. That's not to say that you should make a trading decision there or anything like that, but that's just the target that we get from our macro fib level. These worked really well last cycle. I think it's one of the most important things you can understand and have on your chart. And it's one of the things that we explain and teach to our students in Market Mastery 3, and it's the macro fib. And you can see and look at how accurate these levels are. So after we broke out of the 1.618 and the previous all-time highs back at 20K, this is going back to last cycle, we ran all the way to 2.272, then pulled back and flipped the 1.618. Now, this is how Bitcoin behaves when it's actually in its expansion cycle, when it's it's in its price discovery part of the cycle, which we're kind of in at the moment. The market's sort of like pumping, going sideways, pumping, going sideways, pumping, going sideways. When it's going sideways at the moment, it's going sideways for a long time. And the market kind of reminds me, it's a bit reminiscent of what was happening in 2017, but I feel like this cycle's going to be much more drawn out. It's going to take a lot longer until we finally have that big euphoric blow off top like what we had in 2017. I think that is probably going to come, which is why it's very difficult to pick how high we'll end up going. But I wouldn't be surprised if we do get some sort of euphoric blow off top. And then the downside of that, the opposite side of that euphoric blow off top is a massive bear market, which I think will end up seeing a whole heap of Bitcoin treasury companies that borrow way too much money to buy ridiculous amounts of Bitcoin end up going broke, and they become forced sellers because they're way too leveraged. And they make all the same mistakes that everyone else was making. Personally, we were all making in 2000 I'm not saying me personally was making those mistakes, but the crypto market industry was making those mistakes in 2022, and a lot of people were making that mistake in 2018, borrowing way too much money, leveraging up on Bitcoin, and then getting wrecked. And I feel like the institutional market is about to do that same mistake. It's just funny how you see the cycles play out over and over and over. So we just do need to be careful, but we can use our macro fib levels to give us a bit of a pathway forward and see where we're going to be finding the most key levels of resistance. So 2.272 is obviously a massive level, came back, bounced off the 1.618. Then we ran all the way to the 3.272, came back and bounced off the 2.618. Then we ran up all the way to 3.618, rejected off that, rallied off our developing yearly VWAP here and came up here and then couldn't run to the next macro fib level. We got a fake out of the 3.618 and then rolled over and then rejected off the underside of the developing yearly VWAP. And this was a bit of a rising wedge as well. So this is the kind of stuff that we need to be looking out for to see when we're moving back into a downtrend. And, this was basically a mini bear market, which came with a lot of different bad news. And then we finally ended up wrapping up the bull market back here a few months later in the year. Ended up being November 10th, 2021. And that was basically based on a whole heap of macro factors, which we discuss, and I'll go through everything like that to explain all the reasons why we decided to sell. We actually decided to sell 2 days after the all-time high was put in, which is about this area here, around that 65, 66 area. And that was because a whole heap of different factors, mainly high time frame factors, SFPs and everything like that, failed breakouts, rejections, reclaiming this 3.618, etc. as well. A lot of trapped traders up through here, and then a massive shift in macroeconomic policy was one of the biggest ones. I think most people missed it because they didn't understand the macro and how that would affect the market. So yeah, moving forward, we're going to be looking for these levels to get tagged. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we run all the way up to 2.272. We could run all the way to 2.618. And do something like this, pull back, and then have a consolidation in there, which ends up leading to something like this, some sort of a triangle shape inside these two levels, kind of like what we saw back in 2021 when we had this consolidation play out. So we're looking for, that next major pullback from Bitcoin, and where do we see, because this push here eventually will have a reaction. How high do we go? Then how harsh is the pullback? And then where do we find our next base? I'd be surprised if we push all the way up to the 2.72 and pull back to the 1.618, which would be 137 all the way back to 100K. But we can't dismiss that, but I would be surprised if we came back below this consolidation, which is why I'm starting to think more along the lines of potentially this could run all the way to the 2.618, which is 155, and then pull back, and this becomes the support in the end. It just depends on how bullish the market gets, right? Let's see what happens this week in crypto week in the US government, and let's see what they end up putting out in the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, because there is rumors that they're going to release some information after the 20th of July on how much they're going to be buying for the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. So if that's really bullish, who knows what happens? This higher target could end up playing out. If not, we're going to see what happens at our main target here, which is the 2.272. So the other thing I wanted to really stress and talk about here is the Bitcoin Ethereum chart. For Ethereum to finally take over BTC, and it will not take over it, but take the spotlight off it a little bit and bring back some of that dominance, we're going to need to see Ethereum hold here as a higher low and then break this level, which is pretty much 0.2, about 0.26, I guess. Let's just say 0.26. Once we can clear that level, so let's say it ends up going like this, we end up building some sort of, ascending triangle or something like that. Once we clear that level and the spotlight starts to shift back to Ethereum because of the, the stablecoin bill and blah, 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 and these, new Ethereum treasury companies, because you have to remember, like, Bitcoin's pushing new all-time highs, right? Ethereum still has a fair way to go. Now, Ethereum is looking great versus US dollars, but it's not looking too good versus Bitcoin at the moment. It can look a lot stronger versus Bitcoin, but it's still a 35% move up until it can hit a new all-time high. So 25% down from its highs. This recent sell-off was really nasty. It went 66%. It's pretty much 67% move down from its all-time high. So good to see it reclaiming some of that. And this push back here was really quite strong, 50% rally through there. And it's shown a lot of strength since then. And it's the same story as what we're looking at with Sui. You reclaim the developing value area low, and then you start to get a lot more bullish. This was a really nice setup through here as well after reclaiming the developing yearly VWAP, right? We could hold that, and that was one of the reasons why I took an Ethereum trade, which is up quite nicely at the moment. Okay. Now, what we want to see is this push and clear the previous year value area high at 3,600 and then flip that. So, let's just say it does something like this, right? And then flip this into support, right? And then bounce and rally from there. That's what we want to see for it to get that direction. Flipping the previous year value area high, pretty much 3,600 into support, right? There is also this order block level right through there as well. So flipping those two into support would be really, really strong signal for Ethereum to finally go on a run. And then that would coincide obviously with Ethereum taking back a little bit of the spotlight from BTC. And that will create a situation where Bitcoin dominance finally starts to roll over. Now, we're not sure how high Bitcoin dominance is going to go. This could continue to grind up for some time. But when this finally does break and we get a backside retest on this level, kind of like what we had here, but then it doesn't instantly reclaim, then that could lead to a big rollover. So I've got both trend lines through here at the moment. This trend line will give us a bit of a warning when it breaks first, because it has been bouncing off this trend line mainly over the last couple of years. So you're mainly sticking to this trend line, and then we have this one which came from that big sell-off pretty much in November last year when altcoins really started to catch up for a little bit. We've got a mini alt season for a bit there. But now the focus has definitely shifted back to Bitcoin for pretty much the entire time since then. And it's really just pushed a lot. Like, it's reclaimed, how much is that? Another 10% dominance it's taken back from the rest of the market. So looking for this will give us, whenever this finally happens, I wouldn't be surprised if we come back up to test these levels as well. But let's see how high this ends up getting. It's really impossible to tell, but all we're looking for is a break here and then a backside retest to that level. And it probably will take a little bit, but then the real sell-off will probably come after this one breaks. So it'll end up probably being similar to this. Like, this one ended up breaking, right? Then we ended up having one more rally, and the real big sell-off came after we broke this level. After we broke this level through here, right? And this is the move that we're looking for. This is the move. It's probably about 2 months in the entire 4-year cycle where you have the opportunity to make unbelievable life-changing gains, right? But you have to know exactly what you're doing. And you have to be fully prepared to take the risk with the money that you have in the market, right? So any money that you ever put into crypto trading or anything like that, you have to 100%, come to grievance that could be zeroed, okay? Once you understand how much you want to risk and everything like that, that's in the market, then you can play around with the altcoins and try and catch some of these pumps. And I really suggest fully understanding exactly what you're looking for. You want to know exactly the setups you want to be watching for. You want to know exactly what you want to be looking for and seeing on the US dollar chart, what you want to be seeing on the Bitcoin charts, so the alt Bitcoin charts, and seeing, what's happening on the others chart as well. So this is a really good sign for me that we've managed to hold a higher low through here, macro higher low. And this is obviously bullish shape through here with that channel. Or, you can also say that's a falling wedge, etc. Right, but that higher low through here tells me that we're starting to see the rest of the altcoin market start to get a bit of love. Obviously, it's being pulled up by Bitcoin at the moment, but eventually that will change and these will end up playing out really nicely. So understanding what we want to see on the others chart, understanding what we want to see on the Bitcoin, also the alt Bitcoin charts as well, and then also understanding what we want to see on the altcoin USD charts as well, right? So yeah, once you have that firmly in your head, there is a really great opportunity when this breaks finally to rotate into altcoins, rotate quickly through altcoins over a few months before the steam runs out of the market. And then a lot of the time that ends up being pretty close to one of the major tops, okay? This altcoin season here ended up being, it basically finished right at one of the first cycle high, okay? And then, dominance just went sideways for a while after that. So that's pretty much what I'm seeing across the market right now. I think Bitcoin's probably going to continue to grind up to 137. And, we'll see what sort of news and everything like that comes out from the from the rest of this week in the US, and potentially we could move that target up to 155 and then look for the pullback here. Otherwise, if we do end up having a rejection from 137, I wouldn't be surprised if we see 120 holders support, or we come back to retest this 112. But when the market goes sideways like this for a long time, sometimes when it finally pushes, sometimes it doesn't always come all the way back down, right? This one, I mean, since we've been running this year, it has done that, or this cycle pretty much, it has done that almost every single time. Came back here to retest that massive consolidation that we had in when was this 2024. But this consolidation back here, this is what I'm kind of thinking about. We had this consolidation here, and then we had this really strong push up. We could just grind up like this, go sideways, and then pump again without it coming back to retest this 111K area. So, we got really good acceptance through here above 100K. So psychological numbers. And even on Bloomberg, they changed how they calculate the Bitcoin price. It went away from saying like, $96,000, et cetera. It's now ranked in millions. So it's ranked as 0.122 million dollars. So there's a lot of big psychological shifts going now that Bitcoin is basically secured its dominance over $100 and getting that 6-figure acceptance, which is really, really big psychological level to obviously claim. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see some quicker moves than expected. I mean, this move even is it's moving so fast. Like for it to go from 100K to 122K, in a couple of weeks is just like, wow, what is happening? Because I was trading Bitcoin when it was like $3,000 a coin, right? So, we were like a couple $100 was like a crazy move. So you just see it move 20K in a matter of weeks is just like mind blowing. But you have to continuously adjust to the higher prices, and remember that the reason why we're moving at these high prices still at these same velocities is because newer people are coming in to hold the older bag holders when they sell, to hold those coins. So those coins are changing hands into newer, stronger hands, which, are fresher in the market. So like, all these Bitcoin treasury companies, they're buying now to hold for multiple years until we hit 500K, until we hit $1 million. They're not buying for a quick flip to sell from, buy at 100K and sell at 20K. And that's why I think we're seeing less and less resistance as potentially we could go higher. We could start to see less selling pressure because we're seeing a lot of a lot of those coins rotating into fresher hands. It's just a bit of a theory, nothing solid on that, but it's just a theory that I have about how markets level up and move higher as the early OG holders start to sell and move out of the market. But anyway, that's what I'm seeing at the moment. I really would like to see Solana play catch up a little bit. It's definitely hurting from the Ethereum narrative. It's definitely hurting from the Sui narrative as well. We had the pump fund launch. So let's see how that ends up playing out. At the moment, it's kind of struggling a little bit at the developing yearly VWAP, which is pretty much 169. So let's see if it can break through that and finally make a new high this year. That would be very nice to see. Well, not this year because we had the highs back here when Trump released Melania coin, but reclaiming 185 would be really nice, and see this finally get a breakout of the developing yearly high would be quite handy. So I want to see something like this, and this flips here into support. So if we can flip the developing yearly value area high into support, that opens up when we can start to get these big moves. Right. So until then, it's going to be choppy. It's going to struggle to pump really hard, but we will eventually see Solana take off. And I think later in the cycle, Solana will probably get a little bit of attention back on it, but it is still one of the main laggards at the moment. So let's go and have a quick look at everything else. So some more of like the lower level coins, you could say, like Peak. This looks really terrible. Until this starts to reclaim at least this range low from back there, like not interested. But, eventually what's going to happen is the money starts to roll down the curve. At the moment, really, the major coins are getting the excitement. H-bar had a really good rally. A whole bunch of the coins that have been improved, like the US trading coins for tax purposes and all that sort of stuff, uh, seem to have been getting a little bit of love recently as well. So XRP been moving really nice. XLM, this XRP looks quite strong, breaking out of the top of the developing value area high. XLM as well had a massive move as well. So we need to be keeping our eyes on the strongest coins and see how they go in their pullbacks, because typically you want to be sticking to strength, right? So let's see how this goes. That's a really nice move here, but I don't like the current daily, how that's looking at the moment. Need to see this with a much stronger close, but potentially here, the play would be you'd wait for some sort of a pullback, maybe to the developing yearly VWAP, and then look for it to go again. So, that ends up looking something like this, right? I can never buy something that's pumped like this. You want to be looking for coins that are in consolidation, getting ready to break out, in a falling wedge or something like that, getting ready to break out. Those are the trades that I like to take. I don't like to look at stuff like this. But I would be looking for something like this to have a pullback, and then I'm buying the pullback on the strength as it's getting to break out and run with momentum again. All right, thanks a lot for tuning in, guys. We'll see you all in the next session.